In the history of sports, some careers are measured by their length, by the sheer number of trophies and records. But others are defined by their intensity, by a brilliance that just burns so brightly it can't possibly last. The story of Andrew Luck, well, that's the story of a quarterback who was both the promise of a dynasty and the harsh reminder of what it costs to chase. And that's the question, isn't it? The one that just stopped the entire football world in its tracks. It's a question that really goes beyond the box score, beyond the injuries. It forces you to look at the gap between the myth of the modern gladiator and the reality of the man inside that helmet. You have to understand, before Andrew Luck ever took a single snap in the NFL, he wasn't just seen as a player, he was an idea. He was the answer. He was treated like a solution, a complete reset button for whatever franchise was lucky enough to get him.
I mean, listen to that. That's not just praise, that is a coronation. In the scouting world, where people are so careful with their words, that's like calling a brand new ship unsinkable. The expectations weren't just high, they were literally historic.
And Luck wasn't your typical top prospect. He was this cerebral force. He grew up in Europe, the son of an NFL executive, and spoke fluent German. He chose Stanford just as much for the academics as for the football. In a sport that often demands everyone fit in the same box, he was the ultimate outlier. And at Stanford, wow, he took a program that had suffered through 7 straight losing seasons and he turned it into a national power. He wasn't just running plays. He commanded that entire field like a 10-year veteran. He made incredibly difficult things look routine, and he proved every single prediction about him right. So when Luck finally gets to Indianapolis, he's walking into the massive shadow of a legend, Peyton Manning, and into the wreckage of a team that had only won 2 games. He wasn't asked to be a rookie. No, he was asked to be a savior. And he delivered, immediately. A 9-win turnaround that's almost unheard of. And it wasn't just that they won, it was how they won. As a rookie, Luck led the league in game-winning drives. He didn't just manage the chaos, he thrived in it, single-handedly dragging that team back to relevance. But here's the thing. Underneath all those incredible comeback wins was a brutal, brutal reality. While Andrew Luck was out there making magic happen, his body was absorbing an unbelievable amount of punishment. And this number, 130 sacks, that doesn't even count the thousands of other hits and knockdowns. His toughness was celebrated, sure, but it was also being systematically used up. And let's be clear, this wasn't an accident. It was a failure of philosophy. The Colts front office fell into this incredibly dangerous trap, a trap where a quarterback is so good at escaping pressure that you start to believe he doesn't need protection. They were so mesmerized by his talent, they failed to build the one thing he needed most, a pocket. And this is where the story turns. The bill for all that early success, for all that neglect, it started to come due. The whole narrative begins to shift from these miraculous wins to a grim, painful accounting of the damage that had been done. When you just look at the timeline of his injuries, you see it wasn't one big catastrophic event. It was this slow, steady accumulation of trauma. A lacerated kidney in a game he somehow finished and won. A damaged shoulder that would literally haunt him for years. A concussion. Every single injury chipped away not just at his body, but at his spirit too. And pretty soon, he was just trapped. And this wasn't just a physical process, it was a psychological prison. The joy he used to get from preparing for a game was replaced by the endless grind of rehabilitation. The love for competition was completely overshadowed by the constant, gnawing presence of pain. He wasn't living the life of a quarterback anymore. He was living the life of a patient. And honestly, his own words, delivered with such raw emotion, they explain everything. This quote gets to the heart of it all. It wasn't about losing the ability to play football. It was about losing the love for it. So you see, the physical pain was really just the symptom. The real disease was the mental and emotional exhaustion. In this final chapter of his career, it wasn't about football anymore. It was about a man trying to reclaim his own life. In an interview, someone asked him this really simple, direct question. For a player who once embodied all the youthful excitement of the sport, his answer would reveal just how far he'd fallen from the person he used to be. Just one word. It was probably the loudest, most definitive statement of his entire career. The game, his craft, his passion, it was gone. It had become a job, and a really painful one. There was just no joy left, only obligation and suffering. So how does a person like Andrew Luck just walk away from it all? Well, it comes down to this personal philosophy he had. For him, being a quarterback wasn't something you could do in 90%. It demanded everything. And when he finally realized that he was both unwilling and unable to give that 100% anymore, the choice became crystal clear. For him, it was all or nothing. And the way it ended was just brutal. A completely undeserved ending. The chance to announce it on his own terms was stolen from him, leaks to the world while he stood on the sideline. And that chorus of boos from the very same fans he had given so much to, it was just a final, painful reminder of the disconnect between the player as a person and the player as a product. So, what do we make of all this? Andrew Luck's legacy? It isn't going to be found in championship rings or longevity records. No, it's found in the hard questions his career forces us all to ask about the sport itself. His career really became a cautionary tale. He showed everyone what happens when a team fails to protect its most precious asset. He challenged the very definition of toughness, suggesting that maybe, just maybe, true strength lies in knowing when to walk away. And of course, he will forever be one of football's greatest what-ifs. And perhaps that's the ultimate takeaway here. This isn't a story of personal failure. It's the story of a system that can consume its brightest stars. Andrew Luck was everything the NFL could possibly want in a quarterback and in a person. And in the end, he chose to save the person, leaving the entire football world to wonder what could have been and to think about what it might need to change.